get through this.
Easy for listening. I was able to do it.
Easy for dancing.
I'm not a great lover of cats. That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Not me. That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Hello and welcome back to One-on-One Shadow Boxing Have Your Say. In our second half of this program, our guest in the studios of WTV is Rabbi or Rabba, Sheryl. Hello and welcome.
Hello, hello. Shalom, shalom.
I always like to have you here because you are different from the other rabbis.
You don't say.
Yeah, you are different because you are Rabbi. That makes it different. And in religion, sometimes women are different from man, given in some religions.
In religion and throughout our lives, in some way, men and women are similar and in many ways distinct and unique.
However, in the public arena, non-religious, atheist people want to somehow maintain and establish that in any time, in any positions, men and women are equal and need to be equal because this is the only way we can survive in the world, which I not necessarily agree, even if I am religious or atheist, because it's just stupid. But they're saying it. So that's just one of the questions. And I know you are different, and I'm proud to have you in here because you're different. And that's a good thing. I believe in life, that we are different. And some people even say we pride to be different, and they march on the street for 20 years until they got into a point when they said, now we want to be exactly the same as you, and we want to have marriage and everything because we are equal. They just forget they're proud to be different. And I don't know what's wrong with proud to be different. Anyway, so that's just nothing to do with religion, but just with life.
But it's all interconnected. Religion and life and
you see,
feminism and equality or inequality of opportunity. These are all things that are interconnected.
But some opportunist politicians don't like these interconnections. They just like to have and say, religion nothing to do with our life, because we politicians in parliament and decision making should not be influenced by religion.
Well,
so they forget that religion is influencing life anyway, so therefore parliament is influencing life and religion should influence everything if the religion exists. And they say, no, separation of religion and life. State. However, they try to stand up before Parliament resumes, and they are even praying for God. So what the hell is going on? In the 21st century, where we are with this mixture of religion, life, and state. In Australia, I mean,
in Australia, it's particularly interesting. You might notice I have a bit of an accent coming from the United States, where we have this foundational concept of a separation of church and state, which is to some extent a myth. You're giggling, but at least we have the idea. It's something at least we're aiming towards. At least religious discrimination officially is illegal.
However,
now here in Australia,
there's
not a separation of church and state. Australia is part of the Crown, and the Crown is part of the Anglican Church.
Because the head of the Crown is the head of the church.
Right.
So what are we talking about? And why is that big mouth is always open in Britain, in Europe, and in here? Are they just talking stupid?
Like my brother Francis, who was here a little bit earlier, there's great wisdom in listening. And the more that we can listen to one another, the greater opportunity that we might have for gaining a little extra wisdom. And to the extent that any of us can hear from others and then strive to discern, where is wisdom within what's being said? So if I'm a politician, or if I'm a teacher, or if I'm a mom, or if I'm a fellow swimmer in the Indian Ocean, when I can open my ears and hear from other people their wisdom, I'm going to be able to go a little bit further, hopefully.
I just want to go back to, just for one sentence, for the American idea of separation of state and religion. That's probably going back till the time of establishment of the United States.
We call that the time of the Founding Fathers.
The Founding Fathers.
As it were.
However, two little remarks on that. On the money of the United States, God is prominent because it says we believe only in God.
In God we trust, it says on those greenbacks.
Not even believe, they even trust God. So that's got value and weight. So how that, for the most important exchange, which is money in the United States and represent the freedom and capitalism, it's got that statement which is farly and no way to represent separation of power and religion, if we trust God only.
Interestingly, if we look carefully at the religious history of, as it were, the Founding Fathers,
yes,
most of whom were men, in point of fact.
That's why they're saying Founding Fathers.
What we find is that
yes.
many of them were very interested in theism, but not necessarily connected to a particular church. And there was an absolute interest in religious freedom, but that didn't equate to atheism. Rather, for many of the early American
yes.
founders, there was an idea of the importance of God, often wrapped into nature, but not necessarily connected to a particular church. So, for example, yes, the dollars do say "In God we trust," but there is no reference to Jesus. There is no cross or crucifix. There is no particular church. And if we look into the history of religion in America, we see in that period a separating out, a teasing out of God and Christianity. They weren't considered absolutely and exclusively united by the Founding Fathers of the United States.
What's happening if, so when the United States build and the courts of the United States build and all these monumental Capitol hills and buildings and so on and so forth all around the country in different bits and pieces, they got the 10 Commandments always placed there. And now, somehow, and it was separation of religion and state from the beginning, or that was the idea. Now we get into the 21st century and now we see the 10 Commandments sort of removed from those buildings. What's going on?
Again.
I'm confused again.
Well, it is all a bit confusing. I think there's significance in this statement, separation of church and state, in contrast to the notion of separation of religion and state. So I do think that that subtle difference is significant.
It is, because I feel that when you got separation of church and state, there's the egg. When you crack the egg and you scramble it, you became for the separation of God and state, which is not need to be separated. So we got the egg scrambled and we couldn't re-scramble it. Sorry.
It's all good. But let me say that it was not mainstream for representations of what has commonly come to be known as the 10 Commandments to be plastered all over public institutions for most of the history of the United States. That
So
did
why is
not
that happening?
happen for most of the history of the United States. Only in the last decades, when there's been efforts in some of the more conservative, more sort of Bible Belt areas of the United States to preserve a certain kind of approach, which is a fairly right-wing
Is it?
approach, were representations of these tablets put up in courtrooms, which led to tremendous controversy. And there's been pushback, and officially, legally, they are not to be displayed in courtrooms or other public institutions. It is not supposed to be happening. Because ultimately, the court systems decided that there must be maintained, that we must maintain a separation of church and state in the United States.
So if we're looking at the Ten Commandments as something is go back really long time, as a sort of law of life, or the basic law of life, with the listing of, it's maybe more than 10, whatever, but the Ten Commandments, the Americans or any nation should be proud to have, the same thing to be represented as a basic law.
Hey, this is good with me. I'm Jewish. One of those commandments is to keep the Sabbath, which would mean on the seventh day, not working, but celebrating the beauty of creation. Now that seventh day would be Saturday. I'm fine with all of our shops and society shutting down on Saturday. It's all right with me, but you're going to have to be working pretty hard with your friends in politics and the retail world to get all of Australia following that particular one of those commandments. But you know what? Let's just stick to the honoring our mother and our father. We can stick to the not stealing. We can stick to being true to our word. We can work on the Sabbath part another day.
Politicians.
So there's this fabulous thinker, Jewish thinker named Martin Buber. He's an existentialist, very well known for a book called I and Thou. And one of the many things that he taught was that we need less human doing and more human being. And that when we can be together, laugh, exchange words, explore, consider, maybe even debate a little bit, the more human we become, the more humane we can become, the more godly and good we can become.
So why then the Parliament, if you're looking at and you're observing through ABC's 24/7 news, when you got the parliamentary, debates on radio or on television in on WTV, you are observing kids in kindergarten who not even can exchange two human words with each other in Parliament. So how far this is go with politicians and with life when religion is separate from the state?
Oh, so are you possibly advocating more of an integration of religion into the state?
Not necessarily, but humanity and probably God, yes.
Such a challenge we have then. How do we do that?
The biggest one. I don't know the answer.
This is an important part of our Jewish tradition. This is called a yad.
Yes.
And yad is simply the Hebrew word for hand. Mm-hmm. And a yad is used in our tradition when we're reading from our sacred scrolls. Like this is a scroll, a handwritten scroll, which contains in it the biblical book of Esther. This is handwritten by a scribe, a sofer, and we'll be reading from this scroll for our holiday of Purim, which is coming up in the middle of March, when we remember Esther's heroism. We also remember the cruelty and the discrimination and the hatred that some leaders were able to create, attempting to destroy, again, a minority culture. We use the yad to point to the words in our scroll so that we don't accidentally touch the scroll, smear the letters,
but not even touching with the yad.
No, we just point the way. We point the way, and we realize.
The reading, yes.
Yeah, we point to the reading as we go. It's fairly mundane, although this one's.
I would like to ask you about your organization, the Jewish Spirituality Australia. What is that? Tell
Jewish
me.
Spirituality Australia is a group that aims to support people as they're interested in exploring Judaism, spirituality, and big questions. Many of these are big questions that are beyond the realm of merely Judaism, but about how we live. What's it about? What does it mean? What do we do with despair? What do we do with joy? What are our obligations, our opportunities? Jewish Spirituality Australia supports Jewish people in their exploration, in their discovery, in their questions, in their agnosticism sometimes, and also reaches out to build bridges between the Jewish community and other religious groups. Part of what we do is working with people like...
So that's part of Motive 5.
Exactly. We work closely with Brother Francis in the Multi-Faith Spirituality Exploration Group.
That's a nice name.
Well, Multi-Faith Spirituality Exploration Group is short for message.
Message.
Our
okay.
message is the more understanding, the more peace. So I'm often going to Catholic or Anglican or community groups and teaching about where Judaism fits into other religious traditions, our similarities and differences, helping people understand more about Jesus in his first century context as a Jew, also striving to understand what has led to the horrible anti-Semitism that we've experienced in the last centuries, and how our experience can help us fight against hatred in this world. We're very concerned about Islamophobia and homophobia. We are not going to stand idly by while our brothers and sisters bleed. We know what it's like to be the stranger, to experience hatred and prejudice and genocide. And we know it's our obligation to stand up when others are suffering.
That's what people rightly think about Jews, because they experience something which is very rarely experienced by others, especially in the 20th century, the Holocaust, of course. And everyone thought Jews will obviously never forget that, and the world should not. But with their own conflicts in life, which is many, they got sometimes to be looked as if they forgot what it's happened to them, because they're doing something, according to some of the people involved in that fight with Israel, think they're just repeating what's been repeated against them.
I think that you might be referring to some of the complexities between Hamas and the existence of the State of Israel. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would certainly be good for civilian sites not to be targeted. It will certainly be good for your listeners to hear about how much cooperation there is and has been for nearly a century between Arabs, Muslims, Jews, Israelis, who've been sharing this land for thousands of years. Go to Haifa, where the Baha'i temple is. See how beautifully everyone gets along. Go to businesses that are shared, where there are olive oil companies that work jointly between Jews, Muslims, Arabs, Israeli citizens. Go to places like Wa'at Salam, Neve Shalom, which is a peace village where I've been able to stay, where half of the community is Arab, half of the community is Jewish, and we live together. In the school, Arabic and Hebrew is spoken, as well as English being taught. Yes. Muslim holidays, Christian holidays, Jewish holidays are all observed because there is such a commitment to living together.
So
does it make the news? No. Does it get on TV? Do people write about it in the magazines? No. Have you ever heard of the Sulha? I slept on the ground in an amazing, beautiful Jordanian tent. When my children were too small to walk, we were offered a place to stay with the Jordanian families. It was magnificent at the Sulha, where people had come in from all over the region. Muslims, Jews, Arabs, Israelis, Jordanians, coming together to say sulha, which is a word for slicha, for sorry, for let's get along. It's a grassroots, like Woodstock, annual gathering for people to talk one-on-one and get to know each other's common humanity. Don't believe it's all hatred.
No. But
the quiet majority is trying to get along.
Yeah, my question was, obviously, if this is the spirit of that land where those different people lived for centuries, even for longer than centuries together, what is changed and why we got something, you know, working on the surface and try to destroy humanity.
You're
there.
going to love this.
Yes.
Have you looked
Make me
closely?
happy.
I'm going to make you happy there, Tibor. If we look closely at what happened at the end of the First World War,
Yes.
what do we see was going on in that region of the world? Who were the powers that were creating new legal boundaries
I know.
and new nations that didn't exist before?
I know who these people
So
are.
you tell me what happened.
They fucked
what-
up the world. Because they're being politicians and greedy people, and they're mainly British.
Well, France had
France
quite a
got
role.
a bit
so
of part, yes.
between France and
And
England,
England.
the Middle East was divided up towards the end of the
Artificially,
First World War,
completely.
totally artificially.
Not even mention Africa after.
And 2/3 of what was the British mandate after the First World War, after the Turkish Empire was dissolved,
Yeah, sort of.
sort of, 2/3 of what had been the British mandate was chopped off and made into what became Jordan, and Jews were forbidden from living there. 2/3 of that land.
Now we want to have God in
We-
here to sort of sort this out.
God doesn't come walking along and go zap like Zeus with a lightning bolt. And so the hands are, excuse me, where's yours? Yours, mine.
Yeah.
That's where the power of God works, through our hands and our backs and our words.
When I'm looking at your organizations, sort of what you do and what you really try to do and what sort of programs you run, 2 points is left out, and my interest is delving into Zohar and the Kabbalah.
Right.
So that's, how do you do that? And another one is to learn to read Hebrew in 5 hours. So these 2 things is mesmerized me. First of all, how can I learn Hebrew to read in 5 hours? Because if I can, I want to be part of that learning group.
Fantastic. When should we start? I am so on it. The first,
Anytime.
it's a riot.
Yes.
We use a kinesthetic approach with a lot of music and a lot of laughter. We sing the names of the letters, we play around with them, and it's amazing, it works. That's why we call it the Hebrew mini miracle. In only
That
5
is a
hours.
big miracle for me.
5 hours.
How many letters the Hebrew alphabet got?
We usually say it has about 22, but we have
22.
final forms, so it depends on how you count them.
So maybe 35 or something.
Not quite that many,
Yeah.
but Hebrew is gorgeous. So here's an example. This is a talit that a friend gave me for my 50th birthday. Thank you, Margaret. And Hebrew, of course, reads from right to left, unlike English, for example. We look at the unique forms of the letter. We say, here's a tet. It has a tear on top, so it makes the t sound. Here's a lamed. It looks like ch, 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 lightning striking. Taf has a big toe. So we quickly learn, because we use this fabulous song. Aleph is exceptional. Bet has a belly ball. Has a little ball inside of it. We learn
So
the
like
letters.
learning in a
we
kindi.
sing. It's like learning in kindi. Every letter, every vowel.
Beautiful.
It's
okay,
beautiful.
so I want to learn that. Definitely.
Even more beautiful is when we come to the Kabbalah.
Yeah, that's another one. So that's not the Kabbalah.
Well, that's the
That
foundation
is
of
the foundation
Kabbalah.
of Kabbalah. So that's Zohar.
Zohar.
Now, tell me about it. I know it's dangerous to go into Kabbalah because it's so guided and so secretive in a way. What is the secret of Kabbalah or Zohar?
Well, what happens is that the Kabbalah is more or less organized around the teachings within the Zohar.
Yes.
And the Zohar is more or less following the adventures of remarkable, very receptive, creative, passionate very passionate rabbis as they wander through the Holy Land and discover in something perhaps as simple as a rose deeper meanings in Torah, in God, in themselves. They see what would seem to be mundane to you or me. How many fingers are on a hand pointing? What's the shape of a goblet or a cup? And they'll help us to look inside and see some kind of brightness we've never seen before. And indeed, when you look into the bottom of the cup, what do you see, Tibor?
Not myself, but one version of my face.
There's a reflection of yourself. And when Zohar is working most beautifully, we find new reflections of ourselves, and we find challenges to live as our highest self.
So, I would like to ask you just one thing to finish this off, this interview. If you can blow your trumpet for finishing, which is not a trumpet, of course.
It's not. Sometimes mistranslated as trumpet. There are many places in Christian Bibles that speak of the trumpet sounding, but the Hebrew most always is saying shofar or truah, referring to this ancient instrument, not quite a didgeridoo, but in a similar fashion, we'll move the air through it and hear what, according to Exodus, was the sound at Mount Sinai when those not 10 not commandments, but those foundational ideals of humanity seems to have come into our human consciousness.
So let's hear it.
The sound of the shofar. Can you say tekiah? That means please sound the horn.
Tekiah. Thank you, Rabbi. And please come back next week, same time, same channel. One-on-one shadow boxing. Have your say.